GBH Layoffs, the impact of public media funding cuts. Shockwaves are echoing through the world of public media after a bold sign reading Defunded lit up the Boston skyline and quickly captured national attention. But this viral moment points to a much deeper and more controversial crisis that's unfolding behind the scenes. If you've ever tuned into a documentary or relied on trusted children's programming, what's happening at GBH should have you on edge. Here's why. Boston's GBH, one of the country's flagship public broadcasters, has just laid off another 13 staff members, specifically from its acclaimed American Experience documentary series, which has now paused production on new projects. This brings the staff cuts at PBH in 2025 alone to a staggering 67 jobs lost. President and CEO Susan Goldberg explained we needed to take some pretty quick action, referencing dramatic funding cuts that hit on October 1st. What sparked this domino effect? Last week, Congress passed a bill slashing $9 billion from the federal budget, pulling back $1.1 billion that was supposed to go to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, CPB. CPB distributes roughly 70% of its federal funds to local TV and radio stations like GBH, and the rest supports national content at outlets such as NPR and PBS. For GBH, this means their budget is shrinking by 8%, an $18 million setback. Faced with this seismic blow, GBH's communications team lit up their Brighton headquarters with a digital message: local, trusted, defunded. The simplicity and punchiness resonated well beyond Boston, with over 100,000 upvotes on social media and national airplay on CBS Morning News. Goldberg believes the message's impact comes from its brevity and immediacy. And this is the part most people miss. It isn't just about staff losses or absent documentaries. It's about the role of public media in everyday American lives. GBH is no stranger to tough times. In fact, earlier in 2025, it cut 54 employees in response to similar budget woes, and in 2024, 31 more jobs. Difficult choices are eliminated to deal with the growing deficit. Difficult choices aren't new, but this funding cliff feels different. According to Goldberg, public media costs each American just $1.60 a year. People spend triple that on a cup of coffee. But somehow, this was deemed unaffordable for taxpayers. Can you believe that? This comparison has fueled heated debate. Is Congress right to make cuts, or is the public getting shortchanged on vital services for nickels and dimes? With American Experience documentaries, like the upcoming Henry Kissinger film, still set to air this fall, GBH promises some continuity. And in 2026, plans for a Best of America series will celebrate the nation's 250th birthday. Yet the underlying uncertainty is hard to ignore. As Goldberg notes, we will come out of this okay and strong, but there are going to be stations all over the country that could go dark. And here's where things get really contentious. What happens to children's programming if local public stations start vanishing? For over half of U.S. children who don't attend preschool, local public media is a crucial source for early learning and education. If these services disappear, how will that affect educational equity and opportunity nationwide? It's worth remembering these decisions aren't happening in a vacuum. Back in May, GBH used its platform to rally support with a familiar image of Arthur's fist, a reference to the PBS Kids show, paired with the hashtag #ProtectMyGBH. But will creative protests like these be enough? Public opinion is split. Some argue that government simply can't afford to fund everything, while others see these cuts as an attack on informed citizenship and educational programming. What do you think? Should taxpayer dollars support public broadcasting, especially when the cost per person is so low? Where do you stand on the trade-off between belt-tightening and public access to knowledge? Sound off in the comments. Should public media fight for every penny, or is it time to rethink its funding model? Your perspective could help shape the conversation about what we value in American public life. GBH cuts American Experience staff. Halts new episodes. Impact on public media. The Boston-based public broadcaster GBH is facing a major shakeup as it announces layoffs of 13 employees working on its acclaimed history documentary series, American Experience, and a pause in the production of new broadcast episodes. This decision comes amid a broader crisis in public media funding, with GBH CEO Susan Goldberg highlighting the strain on public broadcasting systems due to severe federal funding cuts. In a statement shared by a spokesperson, Goldberg emphasized that the rescission of federal support for public media, specifically the CPB funds, has forced institutions like PBS and GBH to make tough decisions about programming and staffing. Severe cuts in federal funding for public media are requiring the system, including PBS and GBH, to make difficult decisions about programming and staffing at American Experience, she said. The series will release its completed documentaries for the 37th season this fall, including a film about Henry Kissinger, which was showcased at the 2025 PBS annual meeting in May. Next year, American Experience will feature documentaries from previous seasons and release digital programs tied to the PBS America at 250 initiative, commemorating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Goldberg described 2026 as a year to research and create, aiming to connect all Americans to a shared history. PBS and GBH believe history is essential to our education mission. We'll continue to innovate new approaches for American Experience to explore compelling topics, tell stories known and never heard before, and grow our audiences. Innovation is paramount in this moment of upheaval. Created in 1988, American Experience has devoted 380 episodes to profiling historical figures, such as presidents, musicians, civic leaders, and athletes, while exploring themes like race riots, natural disasters, and blue jeans. The series has won 30 Emmys and 19 Peabody Awards, according to a GBH news story. GBH has laid off 54 employees this year, cutting another 31 staffers last year to address a $7 million budget deficit. The station receives about 8% of its funds from federal funding and CPB. GBH, the largest public media station, also distributes Frontline, Nova, Masterpiece, and several children's programs to public media stations. Corrections. The headline has been revised to clarify that GBH will pause production of new broadcast episodes of American Experience, though it will feature documentaries from previous seasons. A previously published version incorrectly stated that GBH receives 7% of its funding from CPB. It actually receives 8%. PBS in crisis. GBH lays off staff amid federal funding cuts. American Experience impact. Imagine the shockwaves that rippled through the public media community when GBH, a stalwart in public broadcasting, announced it would be laying off 13 employees from its acclaimed PBS history program, American Experience. The reason? Severe cuts in federal funding for public media, as revealed by GBH Chief Executive Susan Goldberg in a staff meeting on Monday night. But here's where it gets controversial. While the layoffs are a direct response to financial strain, they also signal a broader shift in the media landscape. American Experience will air its 37th season this fall, featuring a documentary on Henry Kissinger. But next year, will focus on rebroadcasting its best documentaries. This strategic move aims to give GBH the time to reinvent, create, and ramp up the series with a focus on digital platforms, as Goldberg explained in a Tuesday interview with The Globe. The media business is evolving, and GBH is transitioning from a traditional television and radio company to a digital news and information powerhouse. Goldberg acknowledged the pain of the cuts, but sees a silver lining: the urgency to reinvent for the future. The layoffs at GBH are among the first immediate cuts in public media, following Congress's approval of President Trump's $9 billion recessions package, which includes $1.1 billion in cuts to public broadcasting. Earlier this year, GBH laid off 7% of its staff due to financial challenges, including cuts to federal grants before the recessions package was passed. The latest round of layoffs will begin in September and continue through the end of the year. While smaller and more rural public radio and television stations are expected to feel the brunt of these cuts, larger organizations like GBH will also face significant funding losses. GBH, one of the largest producers of PBS programming, operates an NPR station and creates educational content. It receives about $18 million in federal funding, roughly 8% of its annual revenue. However, the impact of these cuts will be even more pronounced because other stations across the country may no longer be able to afford to license programs like Frontline and Nova. This means GBH's funding losses are expected to be even lighter. Like other public media organizations, GBH will now have to find additional revenue to offset the loss of federal funding. After Congress approved the rescissions package, Goldberg sent an email to GBH supporters asking for donations. As the producer of iconic PBS shows like Nova, Frontline, and Arthur, GBH likely helped shape your world if you grew up watching public media, Goldberg wrote. Now, we're asking you to help shape our future. Even before the cuts to federal funding, the business model for public media organizations had come under immense pressure. Both GBH and WBUR, Boston's other NPR news station, have invested in digital media, podcasts, and events to reach audiences where they are. But they have to compete with other podcasts, streaming services, social media, and other new forms of media for audiences' attention. GBH is not going anywhere. We are going to fight for our future, Goldberg said Tuesday. We've been in business for 75 years, and what we are going to do is figure out how we can serve the public for another lifetime to come and beyond. Both Boston stations cut staff a year ago due to budget deficits. WBUR avoided cuts this year, thanks in part to an inaugural festival with headliners such as Ina Garten, Anthony Fauci, and Roxane Gay, that its leaders hope can be a key component of its future. But in her own letter to supporters last week, WBUR Chief Executive Margaret Lowe said that the station will have to rely more on its donors going forward. This won't be a one-time fix. You've already stepped up, and we're very grateful, Lowe said. Please know that we'll be counting on your ongoing support to help keep WBUR strong. And this is the part most people miss. The future of public media is not just about surviving the cuts, but about thriving in a new digital age. So what do you think? Will public media organizations like GBH and WBUR be able to adapt and thrive in this new landscape? Or are we on the brink of losing some of our most cherished cultural institutions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.